Blessings BookTube. Today I take you to Vietnam. I have mentioned before that I enjoy reading old guidebooks, and that's one of the ways I get some of my orientation to different countries. And, sometimes places to start on things to read. Most guidebooks will have a section on literature. Sometimes it's a little heavy on the travel literature in the country and light on the native authors, but this one has a pretty good mix. This is the Asia Books Guide to Vietnam. It's about over 20 years old, by Jacques Nepote and Javier Guillaume. I like this one. It's got, in addition to sort of little bits of folklore weaved in with the place descriptions. Here's one on Koh Loa. It says, a visit is worth the effort for the sight of the remains of the ancient culture as much as for a walk through the villages and surrounding fields. A famous legend relates that An Duong's daughter, Mi Chao, betrayed him while he was fighting the Chinese. Mi Chao married the son of a Chinese general who was masquerading as a defector in An Duong's army. Mi Chao showed her husband An Duong's magic crossbow trigger made with a claw from a golden turtle, which never missed a shot. Her husband stole the bow and gave it to his father, who was then able to defeat An Duong. 3 large earthen ramparts were discovered on the site, etc., etc. So that's a nice little bit of folklore given with relation to that site. So you can find those sprinkled throughout. But one thing that I really liked about this guide is it has literary excerpts. So most guides will have sort of little box texts, and it'll be like Muay Thai, and it'll be a little article about Muay Thai on the side. This one has also has literary excerpts, about a dozen of them. They are mostly foreigners. You've got some quite colonial ones. And then on top of that, you've got several about the war. So you've got, for example, Michael Herr, who's a famous war correspondent. And he's talking, it's called On Playing Cowboys and Indians. It's talking about how the Vietnamese civilians really couldn't win because of the conflicting orders that were at various times given to American soldiers. The gunships would get different orders from, infantry, say. Some would say shoot if they freeze, and someone would say shoot if they run. So I thought that was a really particularly poignant and terrible detail about the war. I've read Her before. He's very good. There's another by James Fenton on the evacuation of Saigon, and this bar girl that he knew, desperately pleading and bribing and offering him everything and all kinds of visions and enticements to take her with him. I think that story is pretty well known. Anyway, and then we've got a couple sort of literary ones. We've got Graham Greene. His is interesting. He's sort of gone native here, or his character and narrator has, in The Still of Night. This is from The Quiet American. And this opium girl is taken up with him. Phuong, her name is Phuong. Is he still in love with you, Phuong? And then he says, to take an Annamite to bed with you is like taking a bird. They twitter and sing on your pillow. There has been a time when I thought none of their voices sang like Phuong's. I put out my hand and touched her arm. Their bones, too, were as fragile as a bird's. So there's a bit of essentialism here, a bit of exoticism, a bit of, Orientalism, as Said would say, for sure. And then we do have a few native voices. So we've got Yen Hui Chiep, Trong Nhu Tang, talks about gaining independence. There's one of some students meeting Uncle Ho Chi Minh. I think I'll read you. There's one of a buffalo sacrifice, which is seen from an outsider's viewpoint, but has enough reportage that you can really get a view of the actual ceremony. And then in the end, there's some sort of outsiders, foreigner interpretation of it. I think so. I think I'll share one native voice with you and one sort of outsider voice. Let's do the outsider voice first so we can end on the native voice. This is John White, and he's talking about a voyage to Cochin, China in 1824. This is called a forked tongue. On the opposite bank of the stream was an estate belonging to the acting governor, where he occasionally resided. He was in fact there when we removed. And the second day after taking possession of our new habitation, we visited him by invitation. The court fronting his house was enclosed by high brick walls, and the entrance was on one side. On each side of the pathway to the house was a raised terrace, on which were some plants in pots, and the veranda which he received was paved with marble tile from China, a luxury we had not seen in the country. We met with the usual reception. Tea, sweetmeats, areca were presented to us, and while we were sipping our tea, an explosion like that of a pistol took place near us, which procured an involuntary start in us, highly amusing to His Excellency, who greatly enjoyed the momentary confusion it occasioned. He had lately received from Huey some intonating balls made of a fulminating powder, which had been imported in the French ships, and took this occasion, unobserved by us, to throw one of them on the pavement behind us, where it exploded. While we had a long conversation on the subject of merchandise, more especially sugar, he inveighed against the holders of that article with great acrimony, and advised us not to be in a hurry or show any impatience, as they, he observed, must finally come to our terms. For if we departed without purchasing, the commodity would be left on their hands, and as they had brought it of the manufacturers at an advanced price, so great was the competition to speculate upon and to forestall us, for which there was no means of payment, but the proceeds of this very article they, in case of failure, must sell their wives and children to meet the demands of their creditors. After some desultory conversation relative to Europe, we took our leave, loading him with a profusion of thanks and acknowledgment for his kind and disinterested advice. Here comes the twist. On the following day, we discovered that the old rogue was, sub rosa, the principal sugar holder in the district. So one could generously interpret that as admiration for the Vietnamese savoir-faire, skill in rhetoric, skill in commerce, or one could see it very much as sort of following in the inscrutable, untrustworthy Asian tropes of old and unfortunately ongoing. So that's kind of a way that the foreigners would treat these things. There's another one that I liked by Norman Lewis. Talks about the fortune telling. And again, he sort of, poo-poos it in his commentary, but he gives enough of the details that we can get a little bit of an idea of some of the different kinds of fortune telling in Vietnam. Before them on the pavement were set out the instruments of their art, the cards, the curiously shaped stones, the bowl of sand, the mirrors of Captotromancy, the divining bird. Behind them, the walls were spread with black cloths, covered with astrological charts, diagrams of the fateful parts of the human body, the bald heads and childishly drawn faces of phrenologists, the world over, the signs of the zodiac, and the equally picturesque Chinese years which are symbolized by animals. And he takes exception to the fact that these people have a fate, have a negative outcome in their, I think they get a mushroom cloud is what he says, by which I think he means a nuclear cloud in their fortune. But then, of course, they're offered a way to mitigate their fortune. So he objects that you can't have it both ways. You can't be fatalist and then also, sell these ways out of it, which are like avoiding the bombs and having the car, as he put it. Yeah, he says they could do these things to mitigate it and get like an American car. All right, so I'll end on Sa, which is by Nguyen Huy Thiep, translated by Greg Lockhart, and it tells about a crazy person named Sa. So one of the things that I learned about Vietnam is, the richness of diversity. I think Thailand's a little more homogenous. China's less homogenous than you think it is. But anyway, Vietnam, the Vietnam of today, is very much, Cochin, Annam, different kingdoms, the Cham people, the Nghiens, the different empires at different times, has had many shapes and many swings of in power throughout the ages. And so when you get these Western accounts, they're usually of very much, a Vietnamese, like sort of as if that's one thing. And there's never really a diversity of saying, oh, this is a villager, or this is a middle class person, this is a city dweller, or this is, a French-speaking civil servant, right? These are all very different types of Vietnamese. Okay, so let's talk about Crazy Sa. So the craziest person in the village of Hoa Tat was Sa. He was the youngest child of Mr. Pak, who had a flourishing family with 8 children and nearly 30 grandchildren. The old man was famous throughout the Muong region. From childhood, Sa was a restless boy who liked to wander. All his life, he dreamed of accomplishing some astounding feat. He dismissed all advice and was absolutely single-minded about doing what he wanted to do. Could he drink? Anyone who could down 20 horns of liquor in rapid succession could certainly compare with him. Could he hunt deer? Anyone who could chase a deer for days until it lay down with busted guts would certainly compare with him. Who could throw the ribbon ball with more speed and skill than him? Who could play the panpipes more seductively than him? And what is more, who could conquer a woman's heart more cleverly than him? On one occasion, the villagers of Hoa Tat had finished a hard day's work catching all the fish they had put in the pond for fattening. The fish had been hauled into the boat, and everyone was just waiting around to divide up the catch, when Sa overturned the boat in the water. He ignored the screams and curses as he roared with laughter and leaped into the mass of silver fish swishing pell-mell in the pond. Sa was so crazy that a dare was enough to make him jump into fire. For him, the praise of a little child or a woman was more precious than all the gold in the world. The problem, however, was that, as the cruel ways of the world would have it, no one in Hoa Tat village gave him the slightest praise. The people in the village didn't even address him politely. Madman, screwball, lunatic, these were the names they called him. He was like a strange animal living in the midst of people. This made Sa suffer. His lust for life and his strong desires cut him off from normal intercourse in the village. When he was 30 years old, he was inveigled into leaving Hoa Tat by a fellow who had come up from the lowland to trade in salt. That's another big divide in Vietnam with the Montagnards, the people, mountain people versus the lowland people, the delta people. And Sa went with the intention of performing great feats in another region. Once Sa had left, life in Hoa Tat was dreary. The fights weren't as fierce as before. The women had fewer affairs. There were no more extended feasts that went on all night and into the next morning. There were fewer smiles. Even the birds flapped their wings more sluggishly as they flew over the skies of Huatat. Then the people began to remember Sa and to feel that his departure was a matter for regret. News about Sa that came from the salt trader reached Huatat from time to time and astounded everybody. They heard he'd taken part in the Save the King movement and had stayed away from them down in the lowlands. Another time they heard he had gone as an ambassador to some terrifying far-off country. Yet another time they heard he'd been sent into exile for his part in the plot to overthrow the court. Women began to take Sa as an example to hold up before their husbands. The people of Huatat recalled Sa's name whenever it came to comparing the memorable deeds of their village with those of people from other villages. They even quoted old incidents about Sa in which he had never participated. The young people were proud of his name. And so the years passed. The people of Huatat thought Sa was sure to have died in a foreign land when he suddenly returned home one day. Sa was no longer young, and his exuberance was no longer infectious. He was old and weak and looked like a forest dweller. He was lame in one leg, and his eyes were becoming clouded by cataracts. If you asked him the story of his illustrious life, he would answer cautiously. The rumors of the salt trader were partly true. Sa married. The old couple managed to have a son. Sa lived until he was 70, then passed away. Before he died, there was a rumor that he said, "In the end, the most astonishing feat I achieved was to have a family." Nevertheless, at Sa's funeral, the villagers conducted it as solemnly as though it were the funeral of a king. And yes, I think we can see here a certain regard for the outsider, a certain valuing of the outsider, a certain coming together of the community to take care of an outsider, include an outsider, that I think is, you can see in a lot of traditional societies. It's very, very heartening example for us to follow. So yeah, so when you get a chance to grab these old guidebooks, you can find them for every country in the world. Nobody wants them because, of course, all of the travel details will be dated. And anyway, people are traveling with their phones more than guidebooks, alas, for guidebook writers like myself. Nonetheless, you can pick them up for 50 cents or a quarter. They're very often in the free box outside the front stoop of the bookstore or library. And take them home, and you'll find, thousands in the 1,000 pages or so, you'll find, 50, 60, 100 pages of interesting history, literature. There'll be sections on the music of that country, of course, the food of that country, the holidays, religion, the religious thoughts, and all kinds of cultural quirks. You can learn really quite a lot. As long as you read it with, of course, a grain of salt, because they are written very much by outsiders for outsiders. All right. Thank you.